What's up, y'all? Welcome back. I'm your host, Taryn Balzana, and this is The Garden, where you don't have to come alone because we're all growing too. A little disclaimer with this episode, in case y'all haven't already caught on to that, or this. I come to y'all with these topics that are speaking to me lately. Things I've recently learned or am currently learning, because the whole point of this podcast is so you know that you're not alone. And I know if I've struggled with it, chances are pretty high someone else has too, or is currently. So, let's dig in. I read this thing on Facebook the other day and it really resonated with me. And it says, "I'm sorry for all the times you were hurting and the Christian world sounded like Job's stupid friends." How's that for fancy Bible talk? It's not, because the last thing any of us need when we're hurting is fancy Bible talk. Or perhaps, even worse, the Christianese lingo that says things like, if you just do this, then everything will fall into place perfectly for you. Or maybe you just need to pray more. Or God will provide, as the person has 2 fistfuls of food and you're empty-handed. I'm sorry for every time you heard the phrase prayer works from the pulpit, leaving you feeling after the death of a loved one, the divorce you never wanted, the pink slip from the job you never want to leave, that somehow you must not have prayed the right way because clearly it didn't work for you. I'm so sorry for the whitewashing, beloved, because your raw deserves better than that. It deserves time and space to heal. It deserves to be covered when it needs to be covered, and a breath of fresh air when it needs some fresh air. Job was hurting, with good reason. Job's friends arrived for the first week. A full 7 days and 7 nights, they did great. They sat with Job in his own hell on earth and didn't say a word, giving Job's grief the time and space it deserved. Then, feeling safe to be real, Job spoke, cursing the day he was born, not cursing God. As a matter of fact, no one had a more accurate understanding of God than Job. So he poured out his pain in the form of words to his friends. And is often the case, Job's friends couldn't handle the uncomfortable reality that God is God of all, that God makes it rain on everyone, that all experience storms, that because God's ways are far higher than our human understanding, of course things here on earth will not always look to us as they should. And because we can't handle this reality, the need arises to find some reason, instead of accepting the fact that God is God, so there will be things we can't understand. So Job's friends started in with an array of reasons as to why all this bad stuff must have happened to Job. It must have been because Job didn't pay enough, or his kids sinned too much, or because Job hadn't done enough. The list goes on. I'm sorry for words that have hurt you. There was a large portion of me during my sister's fight with cancer where I truly became numb to God. I got so tired of hearing, well, you just need to pray about it, and God will provide, and by his stripes you were healed. She is healed. Like, when someone would send me a verse or someone would send me a sermon, and I just became so numb to it all. I felt like the only way anyone knew how to respond was with Jesus, and I needed to be allowed to be human. Some days I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, I was sad, mad, hurt. Every feeling you could pretty much think of, I was feeling. When my sister did get diagnosed, she lived in Pennsylvania at the time, and her and her family packed up and they moved out here, and we let them move into our house. I had finally decorated my room my dream way, and here I had to pack it up and move again for the 6th time in my life. Everything revolved around her care, and it was consuming. And I don't say all that to say that I would have had it any other way. It's just the simple fact of it. And if you've ever been a caretaker or in that type of situation, then you know it's true. In March of 2023, I started counseling, and I realized that I just needed someone to listen. It felt like Jesus was being shoved down my throat instead of anyone presenting him to me with gentleness or humility. And if it wasn't for the times he was being pushed in my face, the other people in my life just avoided the subject altogether because it made them feel uncomfortable. From March of 23 to April of this year, counseling helped me significantly. And I know you guys have heard me talk about it in previous episodes. I am a huge advocate for counseling, and I will always be. Christian counseling, that is. But one of the biggest things counseling helped me do was gain a healthy relationship with God. It changed my perspective on a lot of things, and it helped me to voice my needs better. I also realized I had to go through that to then help my niece when she found herself in the same place. See, it's not like we wanted nothing to do with God. We went to church, we'd listen to worship music. We believed in him. But it had to be on our terms. Our relationship with God was on our terms. When people pushed us towards him, it just really made us resist more. Because we both lacked understanding. But when we voice that to other people, it's as if questioning God wasn't allowed. He has a reason, so who are you to question him? Is what people made us feel like. Yet many people in the Bible do that. Habakkuk is a book of the Bible I recently studied and became familiar with, and he does that. Literally all 3 chapters he questions God, and God answers with such poise and grace. It's not that we're not allowed to question him, but if we do, we also need to look to him for the answer. I remember asking my pastor and his wife if they had any pointers or suggestions for how I could help my niece, and all they said was to just keep doing what I'm doing. I purposed to not respond with Jesus every time because I knew what that felt like. I didn't want to force a relationship with him on her because I knew that wouldn't solve anything. So instead I listened, and in my own bed at night I'd pray over her, and that God would lead me and guide me and give me the right words to say to her when I needed to speak. And eventually I shared with her that I had been there not long ago. See, my parents were some of the people that I felt like didn't let me be human. Until I gave my niece an analogy one day and I realized it was just as much for me. My parents watch or listen to at least one sermon every single day. Most of the time, though, it's multiple sermons a day. They read the Bible constantly. The way they have scripture written on their heart is something I admire greatly, especially my dad. Sometimes it looks like he's just on his phone a lot, but more often than not, you can look over his shoulder and see him reading the Bible on his phone or researching things that he found in the Bible. He can quote you off scripture like no other, and not just that, but gives you context and meaning. The busiest man in the family, and he finds time to learn what's important, which is a whole nother message for another time. My parents weren't trying to force God on me. God is just quite literally all they know. It's the only answer they know to give. You know when you spend a lot of time with someone and soon you start like acting and talking like them and adopting their behavior? My parents spent a lot of time with Jesus. Therefore, it shows up in the way they act and talk. I soon realized that's exactly how I want to be. Not someone who gives Jesus because I think it's the right answer or what they need to hear, but because it's the only answer and because I spend a lot of time with him. Through spending a lot of time with him, though, you also realize that sometimes you need to read the room. To love like Jesus, or for someone to see him through you, does not mean that his name needs to actually be mentioned. It sometimes means you just need to listen. You need to love without words sometimes. Because actions and attitudes speak louder than words ever will. People will know you by your fruit, meaning the fruits of the Spirit, which in Galatians 5:22 through 23 it states that the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. You know what's super cool? Every single one of those fruits can be shown without words. Sometimes to speak the loudest, you don't need to say anything at all. I also think that some people only give Jesus as the answer because they themselves need an answer. One of the most powerful things you can say to someone who comes to you with their struggles is to let them know that you don't have an answer. Because it takes a bigger person to be a shoulder to cry on than to give an answer. Let them know that you too have questioned God. Because you have, right? We all have. If you sit there and you say you've never questioned God, you're lying. So who are we serving to sit there and act like we haven't? Just because someone comes to you with a problem and is looking for an answer doesn't mean you have to give one. Because chances are, no matter how bad you want to or how bad you try, you don't have it. Yes, they may be looking for an answer, but reality is they just want to feel seen, heard, and understood. For their humanity to be accepted. Do that first. And when they respond with something like, "No one has ever listened to me like that before, thank you." Then the doors open a little bit more to share more of Jesus. And maybe with words this time. Philippians 2:2-4 says, "Fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." In the flesh, we're often motivated by selfish ambition or conceit. Much of what we do is not done out of love for others, but out of our own desire for advancement or promotion. Conceit is thinking too highly of oneself, of having an excessive self-interest and self-preoccupation. The dictionary's definition is an excessively favorable opinion of one's own ability and importance. As we put away our selfish ambitions, our conceit, and our tendencies to be high-minded and self-absorbed, we will naturally have a greater concern for the interests and needs of others. Listening to people's problems, loving like Jesus, is not always, and very rarely, the fast route. It takes longer. It's a bigger commitment. Now you gotta actually sit there and listen. You gotta take the slow way around to get to the part where you actually get to talk about Jesus instead of just saying, pray about it or listen to a message. And we think, well, I don't have time for this. My time is too valuable. This is gonna take too long. It takes more effort to go the long way, and we all hate committing our time. But what if someone decided you weren't worth their time? What if someone had never listened to you when you needed it most? What if Jesus was never given to you gently and humbly? Think about that for a second. Because it took us something to get where we are in our relationship with God. So I challenge you to be that person for someone else today. Invite that friend to coffee or lunch that you know has really been going through it and just listen. Show them the fruits of the Spirit. Because I promise, even though it may be slower, you'll get further. I love you guys so much. And I just really, really appreciate those of you that come back every single week, or even those that make an effort to come back every single week, because it doesn't go unnoticed. And there's been quite a few of you that have messaged me in the past week, just telling me your takeaways and your feedback and how things have spoken to you. And it really means the world to me, because the only way that that's possible is through God. And it just continuously reminds me that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And sometimes there's moments where I am tired. And sometimes I'm just tired. And there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go into this podcast. But I really do love it. And those little messages and those little reminders it's almost like it's just God himself saying, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So anyway, don't minimize what those mean to me, because they mean a lot and I'm very appreciative of them. And I'm just so glad that this podcast is here for you to learn anything from. So I love you guys, and don't forget to share and comment and review, which you can do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Tell your friends, share it on Facebook, post it on your Snapchat story, whatever. And I also have a YouTube channel for those of you that don't know that, so go subscribe to that. Anyway, I will see you guys next week. Bye.